All right, we had some questions recently regarding some of the Papercraft builds that I've done over the years. There's a couple different varieties. There's the 2D and then 3D builds, and the 3D builds are a little bit different. You'll be cutting and scoring and folding the paper to create three-dimensional designs. And right now, I think a good foundation before we talk about any of the 3D builds is just the 2D builds and the steps I go through to cut this stuff out. In this case, we have 1985 games. They've got several different sets out of really cool 2D terrain pieces that can either be built together to form larger maps or used as standalone, like on your battle mat or that sort of thing. And then we have skeleton key games. They have a vast number of sets that are meant to be pieced together, and you can print these out. You basically purchase the PDF files, and you print them out, and then you put them together in any design that you want. They have dungeons, temples, swamps, forests, basically any possible terrain that you can imagine, caves, and of course they're all have the 1-inch grids on them. So, excuse me. The first thing I do, whether it's 1985 games or Skeleton Key games, is once I get the pieces that I want printed out, or in the case of 1985 games, they come in either books or in a box set. I select the pieces out. The first step is just cutting them. So the way I do it, and I never use a scissor because you can get all kinds of wonky lines and so forth. I've always used a straight edge, which this is a metal straight edge, but I guess it doesn't really matter. I always flip it upside down because the cork back, if I use this side, you can see that there's a little bit of a gap there. And so as the razor's passing along it, it can kind of slip under. So I always use this side of the metal straight edge, and get it lined up to where I want it. Pretty simple, really. There's not much to this, and just score right along there. And you can see that you end up with a really nice straight line along the perforation. With Skeleton Key games, they will give you, 10, 20, 30 tiles in a single set. So, if you want to put together like a swampland for your party to go through, you'll want to sit down and look at all the pieces that are available. Oops, I kind of bunched it up there. This razor is really old, so you'd also want to make sure that you use a sharp razor. So there's another lesson for you. Make sure you're using a sharp razor, because as you score along these things, they do dull eventually, and this must be an old one. So now here you can see I kind of messed up. I didn't measure it very closely, and I got a little bit outside the perforation, and I'll show you how to fix that in just a second. But in any case, with Skeleton Key games, you're going to want to sit down and figure out which pieces you want, and once they're all cut out, you can kind of lay them out. And what I do is I usually will just tape. Once I have them laid out, I'll flip them all over and just tape along the lines that in the format that I want them, but on the back side, so you can't ever see the tape. So here I made a little bit of a mistake. I'm just going to trim that right off, and it comes right off just like that. So not too bad. Okay, so once I have the piece I want out, you can do. You're not necessarily finished. This was just printed on regular old paper, But you can, if you want them to last a bit longer, print them on cardstock. And when they're on cardstock, since it's thicker paper, a lot of times this white line will show. And so what I might do is I might take, a green marker and I'll run it along the edge of those green lines. And then for water, I might use a different color. And of course on paper, the marker is going to show up. It bleeds in a lot more. But on cardstock, you get a lot less bleed. You just want to like really gently glide your marker along that seam. So, with the swamplands, you can then build, if you want a pond in the center. Skeleton Key Games has a lot of really great tiles that you can build with. And again, put your tape on the back side once you've got the whole thing laid out, and no one will ever see the tape. I have numerous sets of these tiles that I've already got put together. There are Skeleton Key Games has like ruins in the desert that I've used, and you can just fold them up along these seams when you're not using them, and then unfold them when you need them. But really nice sets. Their dungeon sets come in massive varieties. So this is actually a cavern set. You can see it's got the unfinished walls and so forth, but it still has the 1-inch squares. And this one particular one has fungus growing all over it, and you've got a flooded portion to the cavern over here. Now, when you cut this particular one out, you've got some options in front of you, which is pretty nice. And of course, with these irregularly shaped cavern walls, you'll need to make sure and be very careful about which tiles you pair with these, because you want your cat. Oh, and there's that dull side again, getting this dull razor blast. All right, how bad is it? It's not too bad. It's salvageable. In any case, you're going to want to make sure that when you put the tile that butts up against this one, you're flooded. You're not only going to want a flooded cavern, but you're going to want walls that match up to those sides. So, but Skeleton Key Games, they're pretty clever with how they have all of their tiles laid out. So they're pretty good about giving you quite a few options. And there are flooded caverns, flooded dungeons, and the dungeons are going to be the ones that have fixed walls and so forth. But they have tiles that bridge the two. So you might have a dungeon that breaks through into caverns, if that makes sense. So you'll have like a fixed set of walls, crafted, hewn walls, and then a broken wall, and it opens up into a rough cavern. Now with this one, it's a little different. You have a couple options. Some people will just take a black marker and fill in these areas much more skillfully than I'm sure. I'm sure there's people that are much better at it than I am. So you can fill all that in and so on. Other people will take their razor and just cut these pieces out. So the white is just gone completely. And again, there are those who are much more skillful with razors than I. Or you could just do that part with a scissors or whatever. But in any case, it allows you to build a dungeon and just kind of lay it out as the party explores. Now, my recommendation, I've built entire dungeons out of these tiles before, the entire thing. So every step the party makes, they're actually stepping through. But I've learned over the years that really you only need to build areas where you're going to have encounters. And that probably also means you need to plan out wandering encounters. So if you want a particular wandering encounter in a dungeon that's at a 4x4 crossroads, you're going to want to build that, even though the actual adventure may not necessarily have an encounter in that location. So there end up not being any true wandering encounters. So with 1985 games, they have these beautiful sets. And again, these can be standalone. So we've got a treasure chamber here. They're all double-sided. And again, you can add corridors. So you have a corridor coming in here, like so, however you want to do it. So on this side, we got a cool, looks like an altar of some kind. But 1985 Games has just hundreds and hundreds of options. They just recently released an ocean-going set that also included an inferno kind of hellscape. So you could either do, some sort of salt marsh, seagoing adventure, or you could use those in Avernus or however you want to do it. But yeah, you're going to just use your straight edge and you're going to cut along these. And these are already cardstock. So once you cut them out, you're going to need to make the decision whether you want to use your markers to clean up the edges so that you don't have any white edges showing. So, in this case, we've got a tent. We might take our green marker, take a look at the edge. I don't know if you could see or not, but there's a white edge there. And if you are anal retentive as I am, OCD or whatever you want to call it, you can go along and just clean up all the edges so that when it sits out there on the table, let me move this aside for a second. When it sits out there on the table, you're not going to have those white edges showing, which, your players probably aren't going to notice, but, as the DM, I'm going to certainly notice those things. And again, if you mess up cutting these, like this edge here was cut a little bit wonky. You can see there, I don't know if you can see or not, but there is a little extra white there. You just take your straight edge, score right along there, and it comes right off. Throw that aside, and you got a nice clean piece. And I think these rulers are like $1 or $2. I got this one at Office Depot. Don't even know if they're still in business. The Sharpies you can get cheap. But oh yeah, here's another nice feature of 1985 games. You got a building with a roof, flip it over, and there's the actual interior of the building. So as people enter, winterscape, spring, another building here, and again, flip it over, and you've got the interior to the building. So it's you can set out your little village there, and then as people come in, flip it over. That's how they're coming into the building. Pretty nice. So both 1985 games and Skeleton Key games have some really nice advantages. Skeleton Key, really nice for building terrain in a wide open area, like swamps and temples and so forth. Wilderness settings. You can create a whole map for your table and easily fold it up and use it again later if they're all taped together. And 1985 games has nice pieces if you're using a battle mat, you could throw out a bunch of trees. You can have a few buildings here and there. So either way, here's a nice tent, and then the tent's on fire. That's terrible for the people inside. So yeah, 2D terrain is really nice because it's really fast. You can pull it, put it on the table, pull it off the table, stow it really fast. There's no break in action. If I were to have a huge Dwarven Forge build out there and the party decides to go left instead of right and not even go near my build, well, that's a lot of wasted time. Whereas with the with these pieces of terrain, I think speed is a beautiful advantage when it comes to you know, running your adventure and taking the party from one setting to another, or one encounter to another. So yeah, that's a quick introduction on how I cut and I cut 2D tiles. And the 3D tiles, they come out flat like this, so you're going to cut them out using the same strategy: straight edge, razor. I've seen some people use they're the garment cutting tools, and I guess you could still use a straight edge with one of those. But either way, I do recommend, when you print out like Skeleton Key Games material, print it out on cardstock so it lasts a bit longer. And maybe next time we'll show about how to do some scoring. And scoring is a little different because you're not cutting all the way through, you're cutting halfway through the cardstock so that you can make a nice clean fold. And that's a very important step when you're building 3D terrain. And then as you fold, you can make much cleaner, sharper looking models that way. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any questions about the 2D models at all, but it's about, I mean, it's not that hard. It really isn't. A lot of people don't know how to get started, and I usually just say you get started by just picking it up and doing it. You're going to make mistakes. You saw the mistakes that happened because this razor's actually been in storage for almost a year. I just pulled it out for this little jaunt, and you can see the tip of it was messed up and tore the paper a little bit. So you're going to want to make sure. I'm actually glad it happened so that you can see something to look out for. It's you're going to want to have some extra razors on hand so that you can switch out the blades. I think almost all of them are double-sided, so it's just a matter of flopping it over. But yeah, if you have any questions for the Pickled Dragon Unscripted, just go ahead and post in the comments below. And until then, happy gaming, and as always, be heroic and make heroic things.